Year 10 and 11, welcome to your analysis of The Class Game by Mary Casey in preparation for your English Literature Poetry exam. The Poet. All we know about Mary Casey is that she is a housewife from Liverpool. She was a contributor to a poetry magazine called Voices. This existed in 1972 to 1984, and The Class Game was published in 1979, and it was one of 4 poems that appeared in this magazine, Voices. And it was a magazine that had published poems by working class writers. These authors weren't professional poets at all. They didn't have a reputation in literature. They were ordinary people who wrote about their everyday experiences. This is the poem. It needs a Liverpudlian accent really, which I can't do, so excuse the accent that I do have. But this is the poem. How can you tell what class I'm from? I can talk posh like some, with an ollie in me mouth, down me nose, wearing not a scarf, with me second-hand clothes. So why do you always wince when you hear me say to rah to me ma instead of bye mummy dear? How can you tell what class I'm from? 'Cause we live in a corpy, not like some in a pretty little semi out Wirral way and commuted to Liverpool by train each day. Or did I drop my unemployment card, sitting on your patio, we have a yard? How can you tell what class I'm from? Have I a label on me head and another on me bum? Or is it because my hands are stained with toil instead of soft lily white with perfume and oil? Don't I crook my little finger when I drink me tea? Say toilet instead of bog when I want to pee? Why do you care what class I'm from? Does it stick in your gullet like a sour plum? Well, mate, a cleaner is me mother, a docker is me brother, bread pudding is wet Nelly, and me stomach is me belly, and I'm proud of the class that I come from. In this poem, Casey challenges the reader's class stereotypes. She asks the reader, how do you know what class I'm from? And argues that she is labelled by others in a certain way. Do I have a label on me head and another on me bum? The title, The Class Game, could refer to the way people play a guessing game about people depending on things such as where they live, a corpy or a semi, or how they speak, to rah to me ma or bye mummy dear. At the end of the poem, Casey asserts that although people judge her and are prejudiced against her, they wince when she talks, she is very proud to be working class, and I'm proud of the class I come from. There is quite a lot to say on structure for this poem, so have pen and paper handy to make notes and pause as you need. So first of all, the poem is a monologue. A monologue is a speech read aloud by a single character. As I said at the beginning, she is writing about her everyday experience of living in Liverpool and being treated this way because of her accent and being judged because of her accent and possibly because she's a housewife. So the monologue allows her to express her frustration and, more importantly, to ridicule and to use humorous images to mock a class system. The next thing is masculine rhymes are used with rhetorical questions. A masculine rhyme, as it says here, is a rhyme on a single stressed syllable at the end of a line of poetry. So to ensure that you understand that, the poem should be like this. How can you tell what class I'm from? I can talk posh like some. And therefore you've got that masculine rhyme on the last word. And we need to think very carefully about why that is. How can you tell what class I'm from? I can talk posh like some. Why do you always wince when you hear me say to rah to me ma instead of bye mummy dear? So what is it about these stresses at the end of the line that is so important? And it is mockery. It is this tone of mockery, isn't it? Why do you care what class I'm from? Does it stick in your gullet like a sour plum? It's the mockery that she uses, and the masculine rhyme emphasises that. And it sounds a little bit hostile as well when you link that masculine rhyme to a rhetorical question. So make sure you get that down. And obviously at the end statement is very effective as a variety of the question gets asked. So for instance, what I mean by that is by the end of the poem, the question changes from how can you tell what class I'm from to why do you care what class I'm from? Okay. Your next structural devices are as follows. We've got enjambment used, or enjambment, however you pronounce it, throughout. Okay, and remember enjambment means that there's a lack of punctuation at the end of the lines. Now, when there's a question asked, punctuation is used, but when there's not a question asked, she uses enjambment. So you've got I can talk posh like some, runs in there with an ollie in me mouth, which runs into down me nose, etc. Now, the enjambment adds fluidity to her argument, and her argument is that the class system and any judgment that people make based on your class is stupid, isn't it? That she mocks the class system all the way through. She mocks judgment, she mocks prejudice and discrimination. And the enjambment builds the fluidity of her argument, and it becomes almost unstoppable. We can't stop her from getting out her point, especially at the end. So it goes, well, mate, a cleaner is me mother, into, a docker is me brother, into, bread pudding is wet Nelly, into, and me stomach is me belly, and then into the final line, and I'm proud of the class that I come from. And it's a huge bombardment, really, of her point of view. And actually, and arguably, by the end of the poem, we agree. We agree that making judgments on somebody's accent or dialect or where they live is immature. It's a bit silly. Okay? You could also argue, however, that the enjambment, because obviously, as I say, it's almost unstoppable, isn't it? Is a representation of a class system, because whilst she thinks a class system is silly, you're always going to have people who are richer than others. So in that respect, could you argue that the class system will always exist? Remember, poetry is all about interpretation. So as I've said there, it could also suggest the class system will continue regardless of any protest. So it doesn't really matter that she thinks it's silly, because it's arguably unavoidable. We have got the Shazera as well. If you're not sure what on the Shazera, that is punctuation or pauses in the middle of the poetic line. And we get it down me nose. We get it at because we live in a copy, comma, not like some in a pretty little semi, comma. We get it when the brackets are used, sitting on your patio, comma, brackets. We have a yard, and we get it towards the end. Does it stick in your gullet? Comma, like a sour plum. Now the Shazera is used throughout, and that provides another instance of a division because it divides the lines. So we have a division between the copy and the semi, between this idea, this simile of the gullet, something being stuck in your gullet like a sour plum, and the brackets that segregate the patio from the yard. And the Shazera, interestingly, emphasises the division that she is talking about, that actually there is a division in terms of property, in terms of wealth, designer clothes, the way we speak. There is a division. And the Shazera cleverly amplifies that. Even though she doesn't believe in this division, it's quite clear. Yes, when I get to language, essentially, the toilet and the bog are the same thing. But there's there's an obvious difference there, because one is spoken in standard English and one is spoken in colloquial. Agreed, the meaning doesn't change, but there is connotations. There's connotations attached to this type of slang speech, and I'm from Newcastle myself, and judgments are made, I suppose. We also get, I think, and this is my interpretation, so if your English teacher doesn't agree or you don't agree, that's absolutely fine. I think arguably the Volta is the line that begins, well, mate. Just to reiterate or to remind you, a Volta is when a poem changes tone, often found in sonnets, but not always. And I think the poem changes tone there because she stops comparing. She stops comparing things now. And what she does here is she confidently tells you that she is proud of her mother, her brother, their jobs, and where she comes from. And there's no comparisons or images anymore. It's, this is who I am, this is where I'm from, this is how I was brought up, and I'm proud. So I actually think that that moment changes the tone of the poem. This here is another huge thing about this poem. Please pause the video to make sure that you understand what I'm going to say, because it can sound confusing. When the poem was on the other slide, it looks like, or it is, one huge detailed stanza. But Mary Casey has separated the stanzas into verses, and they are shown by the repetition of the line, "How can you tell what class I'm from?" Right, so make sure you understand what I mean there. So yes, it's one stanza, but they are different verses that are very subtle. And it is broken up with, "How can you tell what class I'm from?" So if we look at that, how many verses have you got? You've got the first one down to "me say to ra to me mum," to me ma, sorry. And then you've got the second one goes from "How can you tell what class I'm from?" to "sitting on your patio," where you have a yard. The third one goes from "How can you tell what class I'm from?" down to "say toilet instead of bog." And then the fourth one is "Why do you care what class I'm from?" down to the end. So there's 4 verses. And this emphasises the idea that each class is closely linked. And there's no difference between them. This is what Mary Casey thinks, remember, that the classes are closely linked and there's no difference. So she's placed it all into one stanza. You have to ask yourself if there's an irony there, though, because yes, she's hidden this division away, but it's still there, which is what I was saying earlier. There will always be a class system, regardless of whether we want to accept it or not. It'll be there because of wealth and distribution of wealth. So please look at that carefully. One stanza, 4 separate verses, but they all seem to be closely linked. Her point there is that there's no difference between the classes other than the way we speak, and potentially, I suppose, the money that you've got. I suppose she's arguing it doesn't change the person that you are. We've almost got a question / answer structure where she asks a question to the imaginary audience, who is us. How can you tell what class I'm from? She gives a suggestion. Now, I do think the questions remain rhetorical because there's no definitive answer. Rather, there's her trying to answer the question, which doesn't work. So she asks the question, then says, is it because of this or is it because of that? The last few lines are slightly different. Instead of challenging her audience as to why they think of her as working class, she asks them why it matters. And that is a huge question, because I do feel like we start to then think as a reader, well, it doesn't. It does not matter what class she's from. It does not matter what class anyone's from, is her point. And obviously we finish with this idea that she's proud. Okay, so if we have a look at language now. So here's the first few lines. How can you tell what class I'm from? I can talk posh like some, with an ollie in me mouth, down me nose, wearing not a scarf, with me second-hand clothes. So why do you always wince when you hear me say ta-ra to me ma instead of bye mummy dear? First of all, the opening line is the question that is heavily involved in the structure, as I say, because it divides the one stanza into the verses. It is repeated throughout. And it's that question that I suppose almost begins to change tone. And it is the frustration of the speaker every time she asks that question. The direct pronoun you obviously addresses us, and it has an accusing tone, doesn't it? Almost as if the reader has prejudged or discriminated against here. And then we do think, Actually, how can you tell what class someone's from? Is it the way they speak? Is it what they wear? Mary Casey mixes colloquial English and standard English. Please get the spelling of colloquial right, because you are now marked for spelling, punctuation, grammar quite heavily with 25%, I think. So the mixture of colloquial English and standard English, again, is used to emphasise division. But she does it in an almost ironic way, because what she's saying is, whilst to to me ma and bye mummy dear are very different, aren't they? Actually, what is being said is exactly the same. So therefore we think, well, why does it matter how you see it? To me ma, bye mummy dear. Why has there got to be a difference? Why has there got to be a judgment if you hear someone speak like that? So as I say, the mixture of the languages emphasises the difference between the two, but ironically also says to us, well, it's the same thing. It means the very same thing. The word wince is interesting here because it suggests that when she's talking to someone, they cringe. And wince, to a certain extent, has connotations of pain. Is it that when she's talking to someone with her Liverpudlian accent, they wince in pain as if to think, oh my God, is that her accent? She's rough. You know, you can imagine that type of response. It's a little bit exaggerated, I suppose. She also refuses to change to a certain extent because she says, I can talk posh like some. So she's saying, well, I can talk posh. I can use standard English if necessary, but I don't need to, nor will I, because it does not affect who I am or what I say. Okay. Next section, how can you tell what class I'm from? Because we live in a corpy, not like some, in a pretty little semi out Wirral way and commute into Liverpool by train each day. Or did I drop my unemployment card sitting on your patio we have a yard? Again, begins with the repeated question. As I said, the tone begins to change now because she's getting frustrated, angry and a little bit confused as to why people prejudge. We get, because we live in a corpy, not like some in a pretty little semi. Just to reiterate what was said earlier, here is your shazura, which puts punctuation in the middle of the line. Now, she compares the corpy to the semi. The corpy is your council house, if you like, and the semi-detached house contrasts with that. Now, interestingly, and structure is massive in this poem. They are segregated because they are placed on different lines. And interestingly enough, if we again look closely at structure, corpy is directly above semi. Is there an irony here by Mary Casey? Has she flipped this system on its head to say, do you know what? There's no difference between the two. I'm going to put the council house directly above the semi-detached house in terms of placement here to show you that there's no difference. Look how the semi-detached house is described as well with adjectives like pretty. Whereas obviously the corpy just doesn't get any description at all. And if we think of this colloquial term, corpy, it does, I suppose, sound less than ideal, doesn't it? I live in a corpy. Wirral way, look at that alliteration. You know, it sounds posh, doesn't it? It does sound a little bit posh. Then we get commute into Liverpool by train each day. Now, that is an interesting line because, look, she can actually afford to live outside the city, but perhaps she doesn't want to. Perhaps other people can afford to live outside the city but don't want to. So again, there's a judgment, I suppose, underneath the surface of that line. Or did I drop my unemployment card sitting on your patio we have a yard? Unemployment card here draws connotations of lower classes, people that don't work. I don't mean any offence in that statement, but there is a stigma, I suppose, attached to it. and that then contrasts with the yard. Sitting on your patio, your Shazera is used there. We have a yard. And we've got the segregation of patio and yard, haven't we? Patio, once again, has this idea of this lovely semi-detached house on Wirral Way where there's a patio. It's almost this idyllic image, isn't it, of a middle-class lifestyle. Whereas the unemployment card with the yard, and you know that rhymes on purpose, sounds awful. If to be brutally honest, there. Contrasts are used all the way through the poem until the end. Now, brackets I've mentioned here just to reiterate the Shazera. It's another means of division. I did say that earlier. The brackets are used to mock. It's a mocking tone, isn't it? Did I drop my unemployment card sitting on your patio? We have a yard, as if to say, you're on the patio and we've got a yard. And it's that mockery. Look also as well at the contrasts in pronouns, your and we. There's a definite division there as well, as if it's almost like us and them, isn't it? Your and we. So there's a division also in Mary Casey's use of pronoun. Next few lines. How can you tell what class I'm from? Have I a label on me head and another on me bum? Or is it because my hands are stained with toil instead of soft lily white with perfume and oil? Don't I crook me little finger when I drink me tea? Say toilet instead of bog when I want to pee? Question, as always, is asked. Once again, it's been asked a few times now. The tone becomes aggressive. And you've got to ask yourself whether or not, through the repetition of that question, your perspective has changed. I can't tell you the answer there. You know whether or not you judge others based on class. So what was your response? The label on me head and another on me bum is exactly what the poem is about, labels. Now, we've got a double meaning here. We have got the label that she metaphorically believes people place on her, as in she's the working class because of her accent, because she's a housewife, etc., etc. But you've also got the idea that people wear labels on their bums in terms of designer clothes. Okay, so we've got a contrast now in designer clothes and judgment. Have I a label on me head? She feels like people, as she said at the very beginning, wince when she speaks because of her accent and her dialect. Look again, this is her mocking again, isn't it? It's a joke a little bit, isn't it? Well, have I got a label on my head and on my bum? It's mocking the whole idea of judging someone's class. Then we get, is it because my hands are stained with toil instead of soft lily white with perfume and oil? Your masculine rhyme there is really emphasised on the last words. We have a metaphor. My hands are stained with toil, and it sounds painful. Stained with toil sounds painful, and there's a suggestion here and a connotation that perhaps the working classes or the lower classes, whichever word you use, have a harder life, physical labour, and therefore their hands show this. Their hands have been worn, withered, ruined because of the type of work that they have to do. So this metaphor here is about perhaps the lower classes and working classes having harder lives, a job that is more physically demanding. Now that image is contrasted with, instead of soft lily white with perfume and oil. Huge contrast again. And we've got this very delicate image of this lily white, soft hands that have perfume and oil on them because they've been kept very nice. Look at your adjectives again, soft, white, White has always had connotations of something innocent, hasn't it? Is the suggestion here that they are innocent to the hard labour that is being done by the working classes, perhaps? Perfume, almost to some extent, contrasts with stained as well, doesn't it? Don't I crook me little finger when I drink me tea? See a toilet instead of bog when I want to pee. Once again, your humorous imagery comes into play. The idea of someone crooking their little finger when they drink their tea is something we associate with posh, if I should use that word, rich people. Then we get the contrast of your colloquial English and your standard English, once again, of toilet versus bog. Now, Casey again is showing us that whilst the language and words are very different, the meaning is the same. If you say I'm going to the toilet or I'm going to the bog, it means the same thing, and that is her point. But let's be honest, for most of us, when we hear bog said like that, we know it does sound a little bit more common, don't we? The last few lines of the poem are as follows. Why do you care what class I'm from? Does it stick in your gullet like a sour plum? Well, mate, cleaner is me mother, a docker is me brother, bread pudding is wet Nelly, and me stomach is me belly, and I'm proud of the class that I come from. So the question has eventually changed, and it brings up the ideas of discrimination and prejudice. More importantly, I do think we are forced to ask ourselves, does it matter? And for most of us, not everybody, the answer is no. It actually doesn't matter what class people come from. We all socialise, or the majority of us socialise with people that are from different classes. This is just life, isn't it? Think about the type of tone that would be used there, because as I said, she was beginning to get very frustrated. So how do you think she speaks that line? Why do you care? Does it stick in your gullet like a sour plum? It starts off as a metaphor, doesn't it? The idea that if you care what class I'm from, does it stick in your gullet? And then it becomes simile, like a sour plum. This simile is effectively asking whether the person she is talking to can accept her. Whether she and the way she speaks is something they are unable to swallow, and there's that metaphor I was just mentioning, something they choke on and have to spit out. So it's actually something quite uncomfortable, that image, isn't it? Can the person she addresses accept her as she is or not? And actually she doesn't care. Well, mate. And this is where, as I said at the beginning, I think, and this is just my interpretation, that is the Volta. Because now she veers away from the questions and attempting to answer them and just says, well, this is me. And this is what I say. This is me family and I'm proud. So we've got this confident finish. She brings her mum up. She brings her brother up. She's very proud of who she is, who they are. She says that she's going to use the word belly for stomach. She might use wet Nelly when referring to bread pudding. But the final line is, and I'm proud of the class that I come from, with a full stop. And the full stop is very definitive here. Sorry, I've put every instead of very. The full stop is very definitive here, isn't it? Because we've had quite a lot of enjambment that has allowed her argument to be very fluid. It forces the listener to listen to what she's saying, and now she's done. That full stop there, I'm proud of the class I come from, there's no comeback, that's it. You accept me as I am, or you don't. And I don't think she's really concerned with people who don't accept her. So just to reiterate about imagery, there's a lot of imagery throughout comparing lifestyles. I've put the main one, or the one that I always remember there, is it because my hands are stained with toil instead of soft lily white with perfume and oil. So This gives the image of rough, muddy, leathery hands as opposed to an image of pale, delicate fingers and a floral fragrance. But remember, there's quite a few images that contrast all the way through: the corpy and the semi, the toilet and the bog. So imagery is used in a humorous, ridiculous way, but also to provide contrast. The poem makes the reader consider whether it's important to a modern day society. The hopeful outcome of the questions asked is that class should not be important. Class divisions are formed by people who think they are superior or inferior. They judge people based on the way they speak and act. So again, poetry is all interpretation. You need to think about judgments, about the class system, about prejudging people. And just before we finish, we should actually mention the title of the poem, The Class Game. It's a metaphor, isn't it, really? Because she's presenting the class system as something that is a game, something that she mocks. It's a game to her because she thinks it's ludicrous, doesn't she? That you are judged in this way. It also, and this sounds silly, and I don't expect you to write this in an answer, it's just to provide understanding. The title, The Class Game, always reminds me of a Monopoly board. And we've all played Monopoly, and you've got the really expensive houses like Mayfair on one side, and then you've got the less expensive houses on the other. I can't think of any of the names off the top of my head. And you're trying to get the posh houses, aren't you? You're trying to buy those houses so that you can make more money if people land on them. And this idea of a game is humorous and is one of the metaphors that she uses to mock a class system, or a society that is built on a class system, or a society that uses a class system to judge others. I hope this video has been useful. Don't forget to check out my YouTube channel for any more videos, and good luck in your poetry exam.